Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Lucas, and today I'm talking to Jason Schweizer. Jason is the host of the Almond Tree podcast. You can find it down below. I got into contact with Jason through Luke actually after my conversation with Emily. We spoke about witchcraft just a little bit, and Luke said that this is the guy to talk to. So I'm very curious. I've watched some of Jason's stuff now, and I think he's got a very interesting mind, an interesting way of thinking. And yeah, the words that come up with him for me are creative, open minded, and chaotic in a good way. But I haven't gotten to know him yet, so we'll have to find out. It's the
Uh,
man who's always outside on the podcast he appears on.
yeah,
I like
yeah.
that. What's the motivation behind that? You just enjoy the sun
Um,
or the outside air?
well, honestly, usually it's just trying to find a quiet space. Because I had my own house for like 10 years. I probably, if I still had my own house, I'd probably do it inside. And then I lived at my parents' house, and then I would, well, yeah, I guess some of it, probably half of it's trying to find a quiet space, and the other half is like I like being outside. So I would do it on, instead of doing it in my room where like I don't know, just I'm always kind of weird like that with talking on the phone with other people around or like people hearing like a
Yeah, it is kind of
one-sided
odd.
conversation. Yeah, so I would try to move just to where it's just like me. But now I just moved to Colorado Springs, and the house I'm living in has like a bunch of tenants, and so there's like really nowhere to sit. I haven't found a spot to sit down and like do this other than outside. Yeah,
It's
so
nice. It's a good feature.
yeah, yeah,
And
and it's
then
I mean yeah, it's a lot nicer anyway.
it is nice. And you're always drinking coffee too, I noticed, or whatever you're drinking from the cup.
Or this. I got both. This
Golden
is what I'm
deal.
known for, and everybody tells me it's gonna kill me, Diet Dew, but I'm like, whatever,
Whatever, come on.
whatever.
We're getting
I need it.
sunlight, so you're doing something right.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
exactly. So yeah, I told you offline just now. I couldn't really pin you down just yet. I listened to a couple of I listened to like parts of conversations you've appeared on, but usually it was a topic you would go into, and you would already know the person somehow. And then I saw one really random episode with a guy, and there was music playing the whole episode. It was like super random. Uh, it was really funny. It was about spooky stories and something like that.
Oh, that yeah, I think so. That was a friend of mine, like that I know in person, and we went to the same Bible study. And he was trying to do his own podcast, and then he wanted me to come on his channel. And I went on, and I was like, "What are we doing here?" Like, was that the one where he was like looking up weird stories on
Yeah.
Reddit the whole time? Yeah, I
Yeah.
had no idea. I was sitting there thinking like, I thought we were gonna talk about something. I don't know what's going on.
It was really
He's a
funny.
really nice guy, though. Yeah.
It was funny to watch. But yeah, I haven't pinned you down. So I usually ask people their story, whatever you're comfortable with sharing, just to figure out kind of who you are, where you came from, and what brought you to where you are today. In the sense, like you like to discuss ideas. Seemingly, you seem like someone who has a high openness and likes to think things through. And I heard you say that you like to pick other people's brains and stuff like that. So yeah, wherever you want to start, you can take 50 minutes, you can take 5 minutes, you can take, whatever you want to do.
All right. Yeah, I can do that. I think I mean, I've kind of been through my story. I think on, uh, it's probably always varies a little bit here and there.
Yeah.
Um, I can kind of try to, I guess, hit the broader points and be quick. So I was born in Florida. I lived there till I was probably like, I don't know, maybe 8 years old. Then we moved to Tennessee, and I've lived there, the rest of my life until literally like 2 months ago. I moved to Colorado
Mm,
Springs. And then, but so I don't know, like my journey, I guess spiritually, because those are, I don't know, kind of, I guess that talking about ideas and stuff, it seems like everything, I don't know, sometimes I say that, like everything, every time we're talking about something, we're kind of talking about God, or like what else is there to really talk about when you really get into stuff.
yeah.
I don't know if that's true, but I don't know. But anyway, so I basically kind of, I guess, did the usual thing. Well, first of all, I grew up very Protestant, I guess, charismatic. I guess the word of faith culture would probably be the majority of it, which is kind of the health, wealth, and prosperity gospel stuff that, that's kind of it's bad reputation, I guess. Um, but I mean, there was a lot of good in it. I took so much good stuff from there. But so I grew up in that, and then I think, somewhere in my high school years, I kind of started to get a little bit of a resentful heart towards the church. And then I kind of, when I got to college, just didn't really go to church anymore. Then kind of had this idea in my head of the church and let the resentment fester. And then I wasn't like I was super hateful to church or to the people in the church or anything. It was just, I think it was just that seed of resentment slowly taking root. And it was very small. It's like I
Hmm.
said, I don't think I was resentful at the church. It was just like the fact that it was there at all just lingered. And then I bought my house during that whole foreclosure crisis thing, way out in the country. And I had this
So is this after
neighbor.
college, or what is the
This was
timeline here?
after college.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I moved to Knoxville, finished college. Then I moved back down to closer to where all my family is. It's like
Hmm.
South Tennessee. It's near Chattanooga, but I bought a house out in the country. And then, and so this kind of, I guess, my spiritual path. I wasn't going to church at the time. I mean, I
Hmm.
always thought I was a Christian. I always loved God, sort of thing. But then, there were, okay, so there's there's like this weird internal thing that was a shift in my spirituality. And then
Yeah.
there was also physical stuff I was dealing with. So I can touch on that too later
Yeah.
if you want, but I'll focus on the internal, I guess, thing first. Because there's like weird moments where you notice a shift in your life, I guess. And so this was one of them where I guess over time, living by myself, I had a band at the time, or was part of a band. I lived out in the country. They would come out there, we'd play music. We're now playing again, but then slowly that dissolved. So then it was just me and my dogs. And so it was just kind of this really weird insular thing that let me be more resentful because I was just fine on my own. And then I had a neighbor and he started just stealing little things from me. And I was like, oh, this sucks. Like, I don't know what to do
That's
about this,
weird.
but
Yeah.
yeah. But then he stole one of my dad's tools. And then that was when this weird thing clicked, and I was just like, okay, it's one thing if he steals from me, but now that he stole from my dad, I have a justification to really, really hate him. And I just remember this hatred, like I mean, it felt black and dark. Because every time I would look at him, I'd see him like just outside, and I would physically want to vomit. And I remember thinking, like, I hate this man so much that I only want him to die if I'm 100% sure he's going to hell. And then I would have this weird thought, I know I have to forgive him. And that choice of that resentment, like that had grown so much to be able to hate someone on that level, it was like you can either choose this or choose forgiveness. And it felt like I was like the only way I know how to remember it in my head is like weirdly like a vision, like I just came to this cliff and it was blackness and darkness forever, or I could just turn around. And I didn't even know how. I just started saying out loud, I forgive him, I forgive him. And I still hated him. Like every time I'd see him, I'd want to vomit. Like I'd physically want to vomit, but I'd just tell myself I forgive him. And I'd say it out loud. And then slowly, like now at the place where I'm at, I haven't talked to the guy in years because I think he moved somewhere else and went to prison or something. But like if I did run into him, or if I mean, I'm at the place now where I don't know that I can 100% confidently say, because I don't know that I can do that with anything. But I feel like if I met him in the afterlife and God was like, this guy has to go to hell, do you want to take his place? I think I would not, I'm almost 100% positive I would say yes. Just because that, that weird like hatred for this person somehow encountering that forgiveness just seems to like, it just made my love for him grow probably more than I can think of other people. Like,
Yeah.
you know, and so that's kind of spiritually where I guess that was a shift, I think, in my spirituality when I started to kind of come back towards God or the gospel or whatever. And a lot of, and what I took from the churches, I mean, after that, that wasn't when I started going back to church. I started going back to church after the physical things, but I started going back to the word of faith, charismatic thing. And the thing that they were very, very adamant about was like just the scriptures, the scriptures, the scriptures. So I just I read the Bible over and over and over and over again. And it just like honestly, the more you read it, it's like you just are constantly encountering these points where you can't. I couldn't form a I don't know the right way to say it a a well-formed theology, or like like a chiseled one or something like that. I couldn't really do that, because you'd read this verse and then it's like, oh well, then I have this verse over here, what do I do with that? And then once my, I guess, theology, I started to more frame everything around the idea of forgiveness, and then everything started to make sense to me. And not, and when I say that, sometimes I get misunderstood because it's like people think I just mean flattery, or like nothing matters. Like but it's kind of the idea of like truth and mercy married together, because you can't really, like, forgiveness kind of implies there was a transgression or some sort of fall or some sort of missing the mark, you know? And so once I started to do that, it just seems like that's the way not just theology works, but reality works. Like it's just that's how, I mean, I don't know if you know Sam Tiedemann. Have you heard of him?
Vaguely, yeah, I know.
Yeah,
Like I see him, but I've
he,
never done the deep dive, let's say.
yeah, I haven't done a deep dive either, sadly, but yeah, I've heard him give this example of like a polar bear, and it's like you have this idea of a polar bear, or this like heavenly perfect polar bear, and it's like no other polar bears, because you can always imagine, even yourself, you can imagine a better version of yourself. I hope that continues forever. Like I'm forever growing into a better version of myself. But if I can imagine this better, more godly version of myself all the time, it's like there's this infinite gulf of my sin from always missing the mark. So it's like there's this truth, this judgment, this ideal that is infinite. It's continually, so there's like no way I'm ever going to reach it. But then underneath it, it has this forgiveness or this mercy, like that's always pulling me to it.
Yeah.
And so that seems like that's how everything works. Like every polar bear is allowed to exist without necessarily being the perfect polar bear.
Yeah.
But yeah, or something like that. I don't know. So yeah,
Would you say the
that's
perfect
that.
polar bear is necessary for all the other polar bears to exist?
Um, I I think so. That's a good question. I think, yeah, I mean, I think so, because I think that exists in the imagination, and the imagination's real, because like I said, I think even if we found the perfect polar bear, or if I discovered like, I just can't imagine myself ever getting to a state of,
Oh,
oh,
no,
I'm
absolutely not.
perfect.
Yeah.
So when I read, and this is something that I'm trying to work through lately too, is like, I think reading the scriptures so much, there's just certain things, words that I hear in the English translation that I've just rewired in my brain. So when I hear perfect, like I have no problem saying someone's perfect. And a lot of people will just be like, well, that doesn't make sense, because we think of perfection as like walking on eggshells, like, the perfectly chiseled sculpture or something, but it's really just truth and mercy married together. That is perfection. So he who's forgiven is perfect. And we understand that in Christian theology. It's just like not really, it feels like it's not really fully grasped or something, because
Mhm.
it's because I mean the part where it started to change for me was where Jesus actually says, be perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. And I was hearing someone preach on that one time, and they just kind of dismissed it. They were like, well, Jesus is like, almost like he was making a joke, because it's like, obviously he can't be perfect. Um, but then it just felt weird. It feels weird to me to have someone that we would say is God, or to have God say something and tell you to do something. That's just kind of a trick, like knowing you can't do that. Um, so then I just started thinking, well, perfection must be um something different than I think it is. Like I think of perfection as like just flawlessness or something, or never missing the mark. But perfection is more like it's missing the mark but being forgiven at the same time or something, and also being a forgiving person. Because what does it say? It says in the Psalms too, like God is merciful with the merciful or something like that, and He's blameless with the blameless. So if you want to be blameless, like you don't cast blame, but um, but there still is a mark that we have to aim for. So I don't know. And then my point was in the Gospel of Luke, when you get to that one, Jesus, it says the same passage, the Sermon on the Mount, but instead of Jesus saying be perfect, he says be merciful as your Father in heaven is merciful. So that's when I was like, okay, there seems to be a connection between perfection and mercy. And so then that's when I started just looking at, like, really paying attention to things like the mercy seat and all this stuff. And I was like, God's this ultimate judge who sits on a throne that we call the mercy seat or the atonement seat. Like, what is that about? So it's just kind of, yeah, I don't know. I'm rambling.
That's
Talking about
good.
ideas.
I'm trying to understand your worldview, so it's good. The more I hear, the more information I get. But it's interesting. I actually, when you say perfection, I think similarly to you, to the first one, the flawless type of one. And then
Mm,
when you said like you're probably understanding it wrong, and then you said that perfection is probably more like missing the mark, but being forgiven and but still
mhm.
moving up.
Yeah.
I think perfection is, yeah, it is unattainable, but I think it is something we can move closer toward, which I
Mm,
think is closer to your first conception. That's the way I'm thinking about it. Um,
okay.
but
Yeah.
you have this you study the Bible, I think. Like you look up words as well, don't you? Like you look up original words.
So, sometimes I'll look at the Hebrew words.
Yeah.
Sometimes, a lot of times, I'll ask Yosef or something, or sometimes Hezi. Because sometimes even looking them up, I you can get like definitions or explanations for Hebrew words, but you don't necessarily get a cultural context.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's nice to ask people too. Um, and sometimes I'm just like, I don't know if this is helpful at all. But other times it's extremely enlightening. So yeah.
I think I heard you say something like you looked up a word and it just said the same thing as what it said. So it was like I don't know if it was integrity or something, but it just said it means integrity. But anyway,
Yeah.
the perfection thing is interesting. I wonder, like, yeah, I wonder what it actually
Yeah.
means in the context of the Bible.
Well, I've heard people say that it means complete or wholeness or
Ah, that's so
soundness,
interesting
like
because to me that's
perfection,
like
soundness.
it's like the opposite, you know? Like
Yeah.
I put perfection and wholeness like masculine and feminine, you know? So that's
Oh,
interesting.
really?
Yeah, like for me, the
That
masculine is perfection and the feminine is wholeness or completeness. So it's funny that
Gotcha.
it's, but the ancients do that more often.
Well, could you, if you married those two together, would that work? The
Yeah,
whole, like the
that
way you're thinking of perfection?
yeah, that's like God.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
my
I think
understanding.
so.
That's
Yeah, see, but yeah, I think that's right. Because I think that's, if that is God, then that's his spirit. And for the perfection you're talking about, sounds to me like it's probably the judgment, right?
yeah,
It's like, yeah, yeah. And then the wholeness is like the forgiveness or something.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're
So
not
truth and
exactly
mercy.
equivalent, but they're, they work in the same way. It's this opponent processing
Yeah,
type of thing.
yeah, yeah. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's right. Okay.
Well, we need to take us back. We can jump back
Yeah.
on this thread.
Okay.
This is like when I
Yeah.
started making questions for this episode, I was like, there's going to be a lot to talk about. So,
Well, yeah,
given the,
I could I can tell you my the physical stuff
yeah, let's do that.
that because you had mentioned maybe talking a little bit about like witchcraft and magic and things like that. And the reason I bring up the physical stuff is because the way that charismatic movement works healing, like healing powers, there's a lot of similarities to me between that and magic. And that's what I guess kind of sparked my interest into it some too. I mean, I think there's also a lot of other things, but so I can give that story and then you can see how that kind of it probably will feel like a little bit like there's I'm performing magic or something, maybe. I don't know.
Let's do that.
Okay. So I had this pain that started in my face. It was started like it was in here. I know what it is now. It's like the something. It's something neuralgia. Let me Google it real quick so I can give the right word.
Yeah, all good.
It's trigeminal neuralgia, and so I didn't know what it was though for all these years, and so I just would occasionally. It seemed like honestly spring and fall. It would come and it would like something would get triggered, and then it would like take over the whole side of my face, and it was excruciatingly painful. Like I would take if I took pain pills, it would do nothing. It would just kind of maybe put me in a different mood, but I would still be curled up in a ball on the floor. Because it would get so bad I could turn off a light in like if I was in a room, I'd shut off the lights and this I wouldn't even adjust to the darkness. Because it was basically I think what happens is something in my face would swell and the swelling would press against this nerve and just
Mm,
leave this constant pressure.
yeah.
And so it would just and it would last, it would weirdly, it would seem like it would almost always come at night and it would
Oh,
last for
that's
hours
rough.
at a time. Yeah, and it would last for probably at least I would say close to a month. And so for like a month straight, I'd be like getting no sleep, just like, and it lasts in and then it would go away and then it would be gone and then it would come back again, like almost seasonally. So I went to so many doctors, thought it was allergies, thought it was sinuses, thought it was my eye. Um, just like everybody thought I was just trying to get free pain pills. Um, but yeah, but it lasted for 9 years, I think. Um, and so it got to the point where I think I went to the eye doctor last, and no, I went to the eye doctor before I went to the neurologist and actually figured out what it was. But I went to the eye doctor and she said it wasn't my eye. I just remember crying in her office. I was just like, because I like literally the first thought that popped into my head was I'm gonna have to kill myself. Like that was my first thought. And it was like I didn't want to. I was just like, I can't live like this. And I think some of it too is when you're going for a month with no sleep, it's like
Yeah.
you're suffering, you're not necessarily thinking clearly. But I just remember thinking, man, I'm gonna end up putting a bullet in my head at some point. Um, and so then we went to the neurologist and he basically just said, this is what it is, you just have to deal with it. And I was like, and I told my mom, I was like, I can't live my entire life like this. Like there's no way I could see living 80 something years with it. So anyway, she gave me a book by Kenneth Hagin called I don't Health Devotions or something like that. And I didn't read, like I never read my whole life. I just thought I had no reading comprehension. So, but she gave me this book and it was just one devotional a day. So I was like, okay, maybe I can handle this. So I'd go out and walk my dogs. And while I was walking, I would read to myself out loud. And then that's when I realized, hey, I can actually remember things I read. So then basically you'd go through and it sounds magical in that, like, I remember one point it said, this, I guess, where it sounds kind of magical is it said, like, you would take the word of God like medicine. It's almost like I don't, maybe I shouldn't use magical that quickly or harshly, but it almost sounds like you can get it in your own control. You can get your healing in control. Just do this ritual. Like
Hmm.
say these scriptures every day, these healing scriptures. But that's kind of what I ended up doing. Um, but I think that so all of that, like reading this book, um, just seeking God, because that's when I really started seeking God because I was like, I can either get healed or I don't know what's gonna happen. Um, and when I started, um, okay, so now, okay, I'll say this first. Like now I know what the pain comes from and what causes it. At least I'm pretty sure. I think it was like had to do with tobacco and nicotine would screw up my nervous system. But then I didn't know that. So I still don't think it was not miraculous just because of the way everything happened coincidentally. That makes sense. So I think I was smoking cigars at the time, but then this was the time where I really started to come back to God. And I was reading that book, walking for hours every day, just reading and praying and seeking God. And then there was a point in that where I remember throwing all my cigars away just because I felt a weird conviction about it. I was just like, um, I didn't necessarily feel it was sinful. It was just like, I need to do this. And then and then the pain just kept getting worse, honestly. Like it just as soon as I started trying to believe for healing, it got worse. And then another point in that was I remember there was one day, and this is where I think it just shifted. I like spiritually and physically, even though I know there's a connection physically now where it's like, oh, probably the nicotine maybe got out of my system after that. I could probably explain it away scientifically, but I'm like, it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
But there was a point where the pain was really severe and it lasted like all day. It was just like, normally it would last like 1 or 2 hours, and this was just all day. And I I remember like trying to work through it, and luckily I didn't have much work. I got through work, and all I could think in my head is like, I just got to get home so I can read that book. I gotta get home so I can read that book. Um, and then I remember just the pain being so bad and just being so beat down with trying to believe, because the word of faith movement, it's almost like, oh, I'm healed. I'm healed already. And it's like, yeah, but this effing sucks. Like, I don't know. And so I don't know what this is. But I finally was like, I felt that verse of just like, God, why have you forsaken me? Like, I'm sitting here in pain all day. Like, this is worse than it's ever been before. When I start to believe you, like, what the heck is going on? And then I got out to walk and read, and the first thing I opened in that book was like that verse in Isaiah. You shall run and not get weary, you shall walk and not faint, God will like bear you up on his wings. um and then I just like this sigh, and I just remember it came out, and I just remember thinking like, there you are, God. Like, I still had the pain, but I just remember thinking like, there's like some sort of comfort.
Yeah.
And then after that, I remember saying out loud, like, I don't care if I have this pain every second of every day, as long as I know you're going to be with me, God, then I will never say anything other than I'm healed. And I don't know why I said that necessarily, other than saying like, I'll always follow you or something.
Yeah.
But then after that, it didn't go away. But I think that was a shift. And then I remember it was either that or the next day. There was one point where I just remember thinking like, I have 20 pages left of this book. And in my head back then, I was like, that's a ton of reading. I don't know why. I thought it was horrible, but I was like, I'm gonna finish it. And I was like, at this point, when I finish this book, I will never have that pain again. And then I finished it that day, and I hadn't had the pain until, like, I literally did not have the pain at all until last year when I decided to pick up smoking again, and then it came back, and then I was like,
Uh,
oh, okay, that's what it is.
and now you don't have
But
it.
yeah, so no, I don't have it. No. And I think so, like, I can explain, like, it's weird because I'm kind of stuck in that point where it's like, anybody could say it's not a miracle, and it's kind of almost, I'm kind of almost grateful for that, because there's this weird way I can explain it away all physically, but at the same time I'm like, it's just that turning point in my life for the pain to be, if it was not that bad, if I didn't suffer that much, I I would have, or if I knew what it was, I could have got my healing and not stuck with God. I could have been like, oh, it's this. I can do this and not seek God. But it was like, the suffering was the perfect amount. And it always feels like it's too much. It feels like it's too much. Like, I mean, I'm in a, I wrote a, when it came back and I was smoking, I didn't know what it was still. And I wrote a song that I just remember being curled up in a little ball on the floor in my RV with the pain. And I was just thinking like, I don't know what this is or where it's coming from. And it just feels like I was like, God, are you just daring me to kill myself? Like, what's going on? Why is this back? But I think because the suffering just hurts that much, but it's like, if it doesn't hurt that much, I know I just don't trust myself. I
Yeah.
do something or weasel my way around it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was that, and the other healing thing was I had warts. Um, basically all over my body. I had some on my chest, like, had scars. I had them all over my neck. Every time I would shave, I would like accidentally nick one, and then they would just spread, and it just got bad, like really, really bad. I actually have some pictures of that on my phone, because luckily I took like before and after pictures. Um, but that one I just started basically kind of doing the scripture like medicine thing, like a kind of ritual. Like every morning I would pray, like probably pray 100 scriptures that were all just healing based, and just really trying to like tell myself these warts aren't there in my head. And then and I kept thinking like, oh, I'll wake up one morning and they'll have like fallen off or something, or they'll just be gone. Like, it'll be that magical or something. But weirdly, it felt kind of like trying to use faith or my psychology as a tool, which I guess there with that whole healing movement, the way they use healing, the authority aspect of it is what feels magical, I guess. And where it feels like humility's lost. So that's where I still kind of wonder about it sometimes. But with the words thing, I basically was doing that, just like, you tell it to go, you do all this stuff. And then there was one verse that said, "What then can I say to these things? If God is for me, who could be against me?" And I just remember looking in the mirror, just being so this sucks having all these here. And that verse came to my head, like, what can I say to these things? And I don't even know how to describe it. It just felt like kind of like a shift inside. And I was just like, that's fine. It's fine. Like, what do I need to even say? And then after that, they started itching, which it hadn't before. And I was like, this is what, but I didn't want to scratch them because I didn't want them to bleed and spread. But then finally they were itching so bad. I was like, I'm just going to trust God, have faith, whatever, and just let it be. And then they scabbed up and just fell off one way.
Wow.
Or gone. Yeah. So I
Amazing.
don't know if it was some sort of, what do they call it? Placebo effect, maybe, where it's like my mind, maybe I focused on them so much to where this is me trying to explain it away, like, physically or something, but maybe something shifted psychologically where it allowed my body to recognize it as a virus and then fight it off. I mean, I think that's what happened physically because they did scab up and go away. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think the placebo
But that,
effect is like, I don't reduce it, like to me it's pretty epic.
yeah.
It's pretty much
Yeah.
like magical. So people's like, oh, it's just the
Mhm.
placebo effect. It's like, no, it's the placebo effect. Like
Yeah.
that does a
Yeah.
lot, Like you have no idea the
Yeah.
power of faith and belief in
Mhm.
uh in healing, yeah. Well, that was really engaging what you just told me. That was like
A lot.
it brought me to yeah, just times as a teenager. Like I have a lot of birthmarks on my body. And I remember just one day looking in the mirror and being like disgusted by myself, And it took me to that mind state for a second. And then I remember accepting, because for me it wasn't, I didn't have an illness or anything, like or a pain. So it's nothing
Mhm.
like what you had to go through, but it felt a bit similar. So I could feel that mind state of yeah, of wanting to will something away, But in my case, it was about accepting what was there. And in your case, it actually
Mm.
healed. So that's very powerful.
Yeah.
And I see it as miraculous. I mean, you can explain most things with biological terms or something like that. But to me, that's just one way to describe it. So that
Yeah.
doesn't mean that
Yeah.
it's not
And
actually like a miracle. Sunset is a
yeah,
miracle for me in some way.
totally. I feel the same way. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So
Birthmarks. I mean, I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. No, you go.
I was just gonna say, I've heard this before that like birthmark. A lot of people believe that birthmarks means that you've been like marked by God, basically, or like I don't know, there's different markings or something like that, which makes sense that people would believe that. I've also heard another thing where a birthmark is the spot where you were killed in a past life or something, which I think is kind of fun. Like,
I'm on a lot of lives in that case.
uh, yeah,
That's funny. Yeah, my wife, she calls them beauty marks, which I think is really kind.
oh,
Um,
that's nice.
but I like the past life.
Yeah, that's fun.
I'll think
And
about that.
you get just sit there and wonder. Like the only one I have is like this tiny one on my wrist. And I'm
Oh
like, what
yeah,
the heck happened to me then?
yeah,
It's,
that's
yeah.
funny though. All right, so let's jump a bit more into the magic and the witchcraft. So I don't know anything about either really. I had a conversation with my wife about it last week because I spoke to Emily and witchcraft came up, and I always had this connotation of like witches are bad, like by definition. And my wife was like, no, of course they're not all bad. I mean, you have good witches, bad witches, similar to wizards, really. And then I saw your comment, which kind of aligned with how my wife thought about it. And yeah, I was curious to explore this topic a bit. You already told me you're not an expert. I don't think many people are, but yeah, I'd love to talk about it with you and see if I can learn something.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I think it's a fun topic. Yeah, I like what your wife said. I feel like there is this kind of knee-jerk reaction in most conversations. I I feel like, I mean, probably a lot of conversations in this little corner of the internet. There's a lot of knee-jerk reactions, but when witchcraft comes up, it's like, no, let's push against that. And I still don't know if that's necessarily good or bad, because sometimes I think that's probably good, especially if you're dealing with children. Like if I had little kids running around, I wouldn't be like, hey, let's engage, let's I don't know, let's talk
Do
about
a little
witchcraft.
blood sacrifice.
Um, yeah, yeah. But that's something crazy. I don't understand the whole idea of there's a weird connection with blood that I'm still trying to
Yeah.
figure out how. Um, but yeah, I've spoken to a few witches, not a ton, and I'm not an expert by any means. The witches I've spoken to, it seems like everyone that I've spoken to weirdly has a niche or something like that. Like they're not necessarily an expert in witchcraft. They have their practice that is what they enjoy. It seems kind of more focused around maybe a certain idea. Like I don't know if he call himself a witch. I think he does. Dara Mason is one, and he's got his own podcast, and but he wrote a book about the dark man, and so for a while he was like focused on the dark man and like talking about this and looking at this aspect of it, which is, it seems, I mean, like to most people it seems very scary. He's called, the dark man is kind of known as the father of witches, and I don't know very much about it, but um it's like the masculine side of darkness, I guess. And a lot of times people will encounter this figure, and he'll appear as a man. I think sometimes they're like different animals or something, but they'll encounter this figure at, I think, like different crossroads in their life or something. And just that whole idea to me seems like there's something extremely significant going on here that we don't really understand, especially as Christians, if we're just gonna push it away. So I'm like, I feel like we probably experience that. We just might call it something else, you know?
Yeah.
And he, for all I know, it could be some angel, because if he's showing up in your life to kind of direct you. But then again, I mean, you could go down a really evil, resentful direction. I don't know if people do that after encountering him. I would say that Dara, talking to him, he was, I mean, extremely nice guy, so he hasn't done that. Every person I've talked to who would call themselves a witch or that is engaged in some sort of magical practice has been extremely nice and cordial. And usually, if there's any tension, it's because of all the presuppositions that are there
Yeah.
of like, oh, you're a Christian, like you're just here to just throw rocks at me and try to hit me. And I'm like, no, I'm actually interested in what you do. And they'll listen to questions too, because I don't, like, I'm still too scared to practice any sort of magic. Because I'm scared of, I'm okay, so I could try to explain this a little more. I try and well, so the thing I should say is, like, I was talking um to one guy, and I mentioned gosh, what is it? I'm trying to think. And I just mentioned to him like my concerns with actually doing something like this. And it was just kind of nice because it wasn't like he wasn't like pressuring me to do it, or he didn't think I was like I guess trying to attack his practice or anything. I was just like, if I'm being completely honest with you, I'm scared of karma, because I think the world is so interconnected and exists relationally that I feel like if I pull from reality, from somewhere, to make my will happen, then that's what's going to happen over here. Like, I don't know. And so when you get into stuff like I don't know, just them being not only cordial and willing to talk and open up, but they're also willing to listen and kind of
Yeah.
have that interdialogue, which is really nice.
Can I ask you like some questions since you've
Yeah.
spoke about the witches? Like how did you meet witches? Like I mean it's like a whole different thing. And then what did they
Yeah.
specialize in? And then another question I have is like what does it mean to practice witchcraft? Like what do they actually do and what result does it get them? So yeah, these are some questions.
Yeah.
If you forget any of them, I'll try to remember.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, yeah. So, how did I meet? So I'll start by saying so my great aunt is, great great aunt, I think, was a witch. I never actually met her. Her name was Alice Norton, and she wrote under Andre Norton. She was like a writer, and she passed away. And then, you just grow up and you're little, you hear all these stories about like, oh, Aunt Alice was a witch and she did this or she did that and blah blah blah, which probably half of them weren't true, half of them were. Um, so weirdly, okay, so I guess I just say that because weirdly I feel like there's this, it's in my bloodline.
Yeah.
So I still kind of wonder if that's weirdly what not necessarily draws me to it, but kind of makes me feel like I need to grasp at
Yeah.
it a little
That
to
makes
try to
sense.
see what's there. And so I think I started to notice a little bit that there were some herbalists would call themselves green witches, and like you'd have these, or there a lot of like witches would just really just be earthy people, and like they just do herbalist stuff in their garden and make magic. And I'm sure they do like uh different rituals. Like some people might say they worship the earth. I don't know if they do. I don't know. So I think when maybe I started to see that, I was like, okay, this is kind of weird.
Yeah.
Um, this is being described as witchcraft, and it's just herbalism.
But what
Um,
is herbalism? Sorry to
and
interject. What is that
oh,
exactly?
it's just like people will grow different herbs and like you mix herbs together to make medicines. Basically, it's
Okay.
it's
Yeah.
it's,
Yeah.
it's just making, yeah, kind of making your own medicines. But they really really know plants, and they know all sorts of plants and like mugwort and all this different stuff that they use to like uh to make, yeah, I guess different potions, you could say. And then thinking like that's strange that like that is so outcast by a lot of Christian circles, and maybe not most, but at least some Christian circles where the pharmaceutical companies are just like so freely accepted. Like you can go
Yeah.
pop an ibuprofen, and I would just be like, I don't understand the difference between turning to, because I'm still turning to something physical, like something medicinal. What's the difference between turning to ibuprofen or having a witch like give me like if
Yeah.
I'm or like something a witch made.
And a
So
lot
I
of
think that
medicine
maybe
is actually
sparked.
like plant-based, right? Like largely
Mhm.
derived from plants if you go back to the source.
Yeah,
So that's kind of ironic.
yeah, yeah. It's yeah. So I think I just started to kind of see the double standard is too harsh, I think. Um, but something like that. So it kind of sparked my interest a little bit. And then um and I think when I started to yeah, kind of see different similarities between the practices of the church, the that movement, the word of faith movement and stuff like that, it made me, I don't know. I just somehow I got an interest, and then I basically started looking for podcasts, which are hard to find, to be honest. Like to find a good podcast about witchy stuff is so hard because most of
Yeah.
it's just like weird feminism, like just shallow, just like I'm like what, you know? It's just, I mean, yeah, it's just dumb. Most of them, it's I don't know. And so, but then I found this one, and she doesn't even do podcasts anymore. Gosh, what was it? It was a very long title to her podcast too, but I know her name was Manna. Um, and she had interviewed this uh girl on her podcast, Celeste, and Celeste told her story, and she was starting to become Catholic. And so I asked if she would come on my channel, basically, and she came on and told her story. And she had uh basically been practicing witchcraft and somehow and basically picked up a spirit, a demon that was like tormenting her. And then a friend of hers said, why don't you pray a novena? And I don't even know what that is still, like, but so she prayed to the Archangel Michael because she could not get rid of this thing. And then after she did that, and I think it was like 9 day novena or something. I don't know. She said this prayer every day for 9 days. Then it went away. So that was kind of the first person I talked to. And then I basically somehow saw like and I talked to another girl, Wei Wang, and she's like, gosh, she's one of the sweetest ladies. But I had heard her on some podcast, and she talked about how she's a witch and she spins yarn, and she spins yarn, or like, yeah, she spins yarn, she creates yarn, and she said she does it with intention. And so like it's magical yarn, and because she's pouring her intention into it, like pouring love into it as she's doing it or something, or like, or maybe like speaking prayers over it or something. And I was just thinking in my head, this sounds like prayer cloths that are used in the church. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if you're familiar with that.
Yeah, I heard you
Yeah.
talk
And
about
so I
it
was like,
earlier.
yeah. So I was like, well, I have no idea what the difference is between this and a prayer cloth. And so, uh, and I was thinking in my head, like, it almost sounds to me like she's doing it better. Like, if I'm being honest. And so I just reached out to her to talk about that. So it's kind of like that. I basically just found different people through podcasts. And then I joined Dara Mason, who I mentioned. I joined his Discord. And at the beginning of this year, I just basically kind of put out a call in there and I said, listen, I'm a Christian. I really want to talk to more people in this area, in this scene, that do these practices. Let me know if anybody's interested. And so three people reached out to me from there. And so I talked to three more this year, but it just kind of fizzled out. I was hoping to do more of it, but I just been so busy. But yeah, that was a really long answer. Sorry
No,
to your first question.
no, that's great. That's great. So that's how you
Oh,
got
and
into
which,
touch with them.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And witchcraft just seems, like, as far as definitionally, um, that's one of the things that's kind of hard for me, because I think the it's just I mean, if you're a witch, it's not a scary term. If you're a Christian, it's like it means something totally different. It's actually absolutely terrifying. But um like even the word occult, um it just almost, when it comes to stuff like that, it almost just feels like semantics, and you really have to know the person, because the word occult, I think, just means hidden. And so it's like, to some people, it's like that's all the word. That's why it's so interesting to them, because it's just, it's occult practices, they're hidden
Yeah.
practices. Um but to other people, it means like just like, I don't, worshiping demons or something.
Yeah.
Um but most people, I think, involved in it, that are doing it, um I shouldn't say most people, the people I've talked to seem like I said, very kind, very loving, and also very wise. Like they're not aware of spirits. I mean, they're not unaware of spirits. They're not like of good spirits and bad spirits. So it's like they take caution in that.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times I hear of people talking, even that do those practices, talking about their younger years, of being like, oh, when I was in high school, I did this stupid magic of like love magic, trying to get this girl to like me, and it blew up in my face and stuff. But most of them will say, yeah, it worked, this girl liked me. But then like the repercussion, the karma of it, like, it hit them later, and they were like, it was not worth it.
So
But
what is this magic? Like, how can I understand this? Because when I hear the word magic initially, when I spoke with my wife about it, to me it sounds like
mhm.
some sort of like manipulation of the elements. But I don't think that's what it is, or what they mean by it, or how they practice it. Is it like all explainable in natural terms? What's happening? What's going on
Hmm.
there with magic? What is it?
I don't. Oh, that's a good question. Um, I mean, I feel like I'm talking too much.
No,
I
you're
know
not.
this is your thing, but yeah,
No, no, you're
okay.
not.
I'm also curious to your ideas as well. But the word. So I think um, they seem to have a disposition, and like I said, I'm not an expert. I've only spoken to a few, but I wouldn't think they would disconnect the natural from the spiritual as easily as we do. So I don't think, I would think they'd see they're just both so interconnected that it's kind of the same thing
Yeah.
for them. Is
Yeah,
that
that
kind
makes
of
sense.
an answer? Okay.
Well, yeah, that's how I think about it as well. But my question was more like, does it go against the laws of nature, some of the things that they do? Because that's usually like the
Oh,
cartoon type of depiction of magic, of like, you're
oh yeah.
so.
Hmm. That's interesting. I would think there might be some type of magic that is worked that way. Um, And I don't know if that just gets into darker types of magic. If you're gonna you go that far with your own will to make something happen, like against the laws of nature. I think a lot of them, it seems almost like with intention and proper offerings, they're trying to um, bring out a certain purpose, um, maybe in the future. And it almost sometimes it kind of feels like a co-laboring the way they describe it or something.
Mhm.
Um, like one example, I guess, would be like you would set this, like you could have your, I'm just like making something up in my head, like maybe you'd have an altar and you'd have your little statues on it of like the gods you admire or something, your crystals, all that stuff, and then you light your candle. And it seems like, I mean, it seems like kind of, like Catholics do something similar, but then you light your candle and then you pray, and it's kind of like your prayer candle or something like that. And you kind of have this ritual that you perform. And
Yeah.
it could be very, very specific with your intention, but you're trying to get an outcome to happen in the future. And so you're trying to, yeah, have reality form around that. And I think naturally things would hopefully come in to the way
Yeah.
you want it. I mean, yeah. And so I think that's kind of how it works a lot of times. I know another example was just like something simple of putting out an offering for the fairies, and you just put like basically just put food out for the animals, and it's kind of like, what's the difference? Like, you're you're feeding the animals of the forest. The fairies are in the forest too. Like everybody appreciates it. I don't know. So like things like that, I think. And then that, doing that little practice, you're more in harmony with I guess, stuff around you.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I don't know. Maybe you get a bunch of infestations. Hopefully not, but
Okay. It
I
gives
don't
me a
know.
better idea. It sounds like ancient practices, sacrificing to
Yeah.
gods.
So, yeah. So there's, I mean, there is, that seems to be where I see the cross pattern where like there's different practices in the church or Catholicism. Like I recently, my parents were trying to sell this house back home, and there was this thing I read online. It's a Catholic tradition, I guess, or Catholic practice where you take a little statue. Probably shouldn't say idol, but you take this little statue of Saint Joseph, like the father of, or the husband of Mary, and you pray to him, help him sell your house, and then you bury him in the yard of the house, and then your house will sell. And I was like, this sounds like magic to me. And I couldn't bring myself to do it because I was like, oh gosh, like what if their house actually sold? Then I would be scared. I'd be
Yeah.
like, man, I can't do it.
No.
Um, but that seems like a magic ritual to me. And there's word of faith movement stuff like the healing, like the prayer cloths kind of seems like magic. I don't know if any of it's wrong. I think that's just why I take such interest in it because I'm like, I feel like I shouldn't say I don't know that any of it's wrong because I still can't bring myself to do it. I can't bring myself to throw it out either though. Like I still feel this weird thing where like I think there's there's something to that. Uh, Magic seems to be trying to push your will out into the universe,
Hmm.
like your will, not necessarily even God's will, like your will. Um, because I asked Christopher, my one of the guys, what he would describe divination as. And he said divination is like asking the universe for what it's telling you, like a message, like tarot cards is basically saying like everything outside of me is this is what is pressing outside of me. So divination is you're trying to like read or at least get a sense. You're not trapped in it, but you're trying to get a sense of like, okay, here, there. I assume astrology is kind of the same way. You're seeing where the planets are and the gravitational pulls, all that stuff. So and a lot of times that's described as magic,
Yeah.
but then, but I think that's just more maybe divination. And then magic is when he said is when you're trying to force your will out into
Yeah.
the world. Um, and so that made sense to me. And I forgot what I was gonna say. There is another form of magic that like that I don't know what all is involved, but there's I mean, like I said, there are aspects like talking to witches and stuff. I kind of wish more people would do that, but there is there are other forms of it that just seem really dark and can get you in a lot of trouble. Like, yeah, I don't know, but
Okay. Yeah, the way I think about it is that if you worship to, or if you sacrifice to gods, let's say, um,
Mhm.
and if you try to impose your will on nature, I think one of the reasons that Christianity, I don't know if I can speak for Christianity, but why that is against that is because I think it's like it's sinful in a sense that it's pride that you think you can do that, and it's worshiping lower gods of some sorts. But I don't know if that's necessarily bad, if because for example there's like, saints you can pray to as well, and I feel like
Mhm.
saints are by definition lower, angels are by definition lower than God. So I'm not sure how you can easily distinguish the good from the bad, but you're opening up a whole universe to me that I feel like I should explore with caution, of course. But
Yeah,
it's
with caution,
yeah,
I would
yeah,
say.
with a lot of caution because magical tales are also always like tales of exactly what you're describing, what you're afraid of. You do something and then it bites
Yeah,
you back in a
yeah,
poetic way. So
yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is a whole world out there, and there is a lot of ways I think you could get trapped. I think that's why I'm scared of certain types of magic because I feel like it's weirdly making um uh you could be making a vow with something and you don't know what that thing is in a
yeah,
way. Um I don't know if that's the right way to say it. But like you said, even with angels being higher up, I know there was that whole Vervaeke thing where you're talking to Hermes, I
yeah,
think. And
yeah,
I don't know if you heard about that. Yeah.
yeah,
And a lot of people were freaking out about it. And I was like, just let it be. I was like, it's a planet. I was like, it's a god. Yeah,
yeah,
it was a god to them. But I was like, it's also a planet. I was like, I would say it's an angel that got put up there. But I would still say, I guess it's, I would think everything is fine, is good and good as long as it's not the God. Like, because I mean, God can send angels. Like, he could talk to you through a tree if you have some sort of moment and you're just like, you see this tree and it just hits you poetically or something. And so God could talk to you through uh, this divine messenger through dream states. But it's like, if that's the one you're seeking, if that's the God, if he takes the most high, then like, you're just, I don't know.
yeah. You
That's,
got to you got to see it as like you got to see it for what it is. So you cannot
mhm.
absolutize whoever is messaging you, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah. I didn't really see, I still don't necessarily see the okay, well, no, I do see the difference. There's always differences and similarities between these things too, but I mean, like, there's Hermes is the messenger god because he goes quickest around the sun and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and God put that planet in place. So it's kind of hard for me to even deny that because he says in Genesis he put the planets in the sky for signs and seasons and times and years. It's like the way the planets speak with astrology, not like the silly horoscopes that are just like silly. Um, but like actual, like, really getting into it. There's a lot of depth there. And but even with just Vervaeke talking to a messenger deity, it's like I don't know if this is a type, like Gabriel is also a messenger. So it's like
It's true.
I don't know, there's if it's a just a type of Hermes, I don't know actually, but it's if it's some sort of messenger
Mm-hmm.
being, like, I don't know. Yeah, I just thought that was super interesting when all that was happening. Um, uh,
Can you tell
but there
me?
is, like you said, there's a whole world out there. So,
Yeah, there is. Do you have any experiences where you were approached by beings, higher beings than humans, let's say?
oh,
If you're willing to share, you don't have to, of course, if it's personal.
no, no, I don't mind sharing anything. Usually all the stuff I remember is like bad or scary. It's weird. Like I don't. I mean, like I said, I remember the weird. I remember good things,
Yeah,
but it always seems like the good things to me are like in nature or something.
I see.
Like there's a tree back home I go and sit under and I'm like, why is this tree so comforting? And it's
Yeah.
just like, so I mean, maybe there's an angel there or something, and I just don't have eyes to see. And it's
Mm,
uh and even that being out in nature and you just sometimes hear the wind go through the trees, and it's just like that verse in Isaiah comes to mind, all the leaves clap their hands and stuff. And I'm like, it's just like those things I remember,
yeah.
but not like beings, but the um I've seen there's this one, I guess, archetypal thing that multiple people see. It's called the hag. Um, she basically looks like the old lady in Snow White. Yeah, that it's basically looks like her except a real person. I saw her twice in my once in my dreams, once as I was waking up. I woke up out of a dream and she was like right here, and I sat up
Oh,
and went through her face.
that's
Yeah, it
rough.
was terrifying. I like couldn't breathe. It was terrifying. Um, so I've seen things like that. Um, I think a lot of trying to think if I've seen stuff like other than because I've seen some other stuff once, and it was one of those things where like I think I woke up, but I'm not even positive. Because I saw these three beings at the foot of my bed one time. They were extremely terrifying, but they didn't strike me as evil. It kind of seems like one of those Scrooge things. It was like, you're gonna have to deal with these three beings. And like, but they were absolutely terrifying. And I remember the third one, I think the first one was a little child, and it was like in this cloak that was like this kind of burnt orange red, but I don't know how to describe it. He was scary. And then the second one was like this weird ghostly white figure that was also terrifying. That doesn't sound scary the way I'm saying it. And then the third one was so scary I couldn't even remember it. Was all I remembered from that. And I don't know if I woke up and saw them and then kind of came to more of a full consciousness, or if I was asleep the whole time and slept and dreamt that I woke up. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was. And then the next year, it just, I mean, it felt like I did wrestle with a lot. So I feel like there was probably validity to that, but yeah, it's kind of like some weird Scrooge thing of like, here's
All
these three
right.
beings, you're gonna have to. But it's weird because I mean, I remember it pretty vividly, uh, and it's strange how I'll remember certain dreams will flee away,
Mm,
and other ones will just like stick. So there's that. There's some other stuff. There was one thing that was that was very physical. Um, but I didn't see a being or anything. It was just like weirdly connections, physical stuff. But I don't know. Have you ever seen anything like that, or like
yeah, I had once in my dreams, I had a kind of like a demon type of figure. You know, this term incubus,
yeah, yeah,
it was like a female figure to try to like make love to me or something in a dream. And
succubus?
succubus, and it was just like I knew she was evil, you know? And yeah, I think I, strayed her off, but it was like super, super scary. And then I had very
Yeah.
positive beings as well, but that was on the influence of psychedelics, uh, where I had two
Oh, the
figures.
positive beings were.
Yeah, the positive beings were they like brought me into. I've spoken about it a bit before, but they brought me into this world of just pure love, and they were like parental type of figures, and they were. So I have a vague memory of what all of this looked like, but it's kind of beyond the visual. So it's like you're seeing with, like you're not seeing with your eyes exactly. It's like in your mind's eye, but in many ways it's like colors you couldn't even describe. But what I do remember and how I would draw them is that they would consist of lights. So they were like you could see them as stars, and they were kind of abstract looking, but they did have like eyes. So they would have like stars in circle shapes, and they would have eyes, and they would be very good to me, and they would just show me. And I remember like being born into that world, and they would just be like happy to see me and to receive me, and then they would like guide me into that dimension of love and understanding. And that was a transformative experience, but I rarely speak about
That's
the
super
being
cool.
aspect of it.
So you said their eyes were like basically like just the stars were in their eyes.
Well, no, the stars created the outlines of their eyes, and their eyes were just like holes. So they weren't really like physical beings. You know, this is
Yeah.
just the stars or the lights, whatever they were, created these shapes. I think they created them so that they would make sense to me. Like they would be like sort of like humanoid shapes, but I think
Yeah.
it's
That's really cool.
yeah, something like that.
That's super interesting. Do you still use psychedelics occasionally?
No, I did it once, and I was
Oh, okay.
told very clearly that I should never do that again.
Yeah.
Not that it was bad. It was a tremendously powerful and transformative experience in the best possible way, but it was so powerful and so potent that I made a promise to myself while I was in that, of like, you've seen what you had to see, and it's good, and you have to
Yeah.
go make your life better, and that's it.
Mm.
Because like the space in
Yeah.
between coming down, it's like the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. And like not being able to speak for 2 hours and stuff like that, which was just horrifying. But it was
Yeah.
contrasted by this overwhelming love that completely made it worth it. But I'm good on that note. I'm not
That's
gonna
crazy.
experiment more, I think.
That reminds me, I don't know why, what popped in my head was when Paul in the scripture says that he goes to the third heaven, to paradise, and hears inexpressible words.
Yeah,
Like you
yeah,
kind of
that's what
just
felt
having to
like that.
sit in silence. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
and then you forget how to speak. Like it's crazy. Like I would come back and I wouldn't, like, I couldn't grasp my reality. So I came back and it was like in the center, and I saw the people there and I just didn't know how to interact with them. And I tried to say things, but I couldn't speak. And then I tried to like hold this apple and I just couldn't believe that. And then after a while, you start to come down and the words come out of your body, but you feel like, yeah, it was indescribable. And I still have been trying to make sense of it for years, but um,
wow.
it has definitely shaped my worldview in a positive sense. It was after that that I got back to Christianity. Um,
Wow.
but
That's cool.
very blessed
So
with
you
that
can't even
experience.
just you can't even like really describe what the love was like if you
No,
tried, would
it
you?
was
Yeah.
so far beyond. Like the
That's
things that make me cry are the descriptions that try to refer beyond words, because it has to be,
mm,
you know.
that's really cool. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Because if that love is what is creating and allowing the everything to exist
Yeah,
and holding everything together, it's like there's an endless possibility, or at least we hope there's an endless possibility for further creation, like be
yeah,
fruitful and multiply. So there has to be like an infinite allowance for that creation to
yeah,
still be encapsulated by that love. So that love has to be so unfathomable, you know.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's
I heard
cool.
you say that. I heard you speak about like universalism, and I'd never heard of
Yeah.
that before. And when
Oh,
you explained it, I was like, oh, that's it's the first time I heard it, but immediately I was like, oh, that could make sense of things, because I've been struggling since I had that experience with making sense of an alleviation of death anxiety. And then I was immediately like, how come I believe that it will be okay when I die? And I first believed that it would be okay for everyone, but then I was like, but people, there's evil. And so
yeah.
can you
Ah,
quickly, for people at home, explain what that universalism idea is? And then
yeah, yeah. A lot of people when they hear that term, it's they think just nothing. It sounds very like just meaningless to them because they're like if they think nothing matters, like everybody goes to heaven, so anybody can do
yeah,
whatever they want. And it's not that, at least the way I kind of understand it, it's not that at all. Because it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier with the the truth and mercy, or the perfection and the wholeness. Um, however you want to categorize it, or the perfection and the love you experienced. It's like um there's this ideal self, this ideal God that's infinitely righteous. So it's, if you have something that's infinitely righteous, it's infinite, and you're always going to miss the mark, and you always should, because there's always this further up and further in. um so there's so there's that, but then there's the love that undergirds it. And the reason I have come to the universalism, I'm trying to tie this into that so I don't get too derailed with my thoughts scattering off. The reading the Gospels and I guess trying to ask, the Christian claim is that Jesus is God. And I'm trying to ask, in what way is he God? If he's fully God and fully man, like how does that work? And then, gosh, that's probably the wrong route to go, because I don't even know that needs to be explored, honestly. I think it was just when I started to look into the mercy seat and seeing the judge of all creation and sitting on a throne of mercy, and then he comes into the world. He tells us when he's healing the paralytic, he says, the Son of Man has power to forgive sins. And then it says they all marveled that God had given this power to men. And it doesn't say to Jesus, it says like to men, like we have power to forgive people. And so when he says be perfect, and then he says be merciful, it's like it's two sides to the same coin. And it says that over and over in the gospel. It says like, unless you forgive, you won't be forgiven. If you don't forgive, your heavenly Father won't forgive you. And so then like, when is forgiveness complete? Like, when is this actually done? Like, we're only when we forgive all. And then, so there's just so many ideas. And there's also we'll often use Hitler as an example, but like, I know Nate Heil says it too, but Hitler has a mother. So it's like, what do I do with his mom?
Yeah.
There's, I think when I started to think about it more too, was when I have an aunt, my Aunt Mary, her son was like, he was a year older than me. And she, as all growing up my whole life, I was always told she wasn't a Christian. And then her son died of a drug overdose. So I was just thinking, I think this was years and years ago, that sparked in my head the thought of like, well, if like, I mean, I could just kind of maybe trust he'd be in heaven, but maybe he wouldn't. Maybe half the people I know would say he's in hell. If he is in heaven and then his mom goes to hell, what do I do with that? Or if he's in hell and his mom goes to heaven, like, what do I do with that? Like, there's this weird disconnect. And it's like, and then that, I think, continuing to read the scriptures and praying to see God, that's stirring up something in me of like, I don't know how I can face his mom. I don't know how I could face his mother without her son. I don't know how I could face God without his son. And like, what if on Judgment Day, God or somebody asked me about this other person? Like, what am I going to say? There's like, so then that, like I said, while I'm doing a terrible job at explaining this or tying this together, but because there was a lot of things coming together in one that I think kind of made me just continually like put me on that path where like I feel like if you're going to take the Christian route and the maybe not like a certain sects of Christianity, but I just I don't know, the love that Jesus shows. I'll get to there. He says, greater love hath no man than this, than to lay down his life for his friends. And then he also tells us to love our enemies. And then there's the whole parable of like, love your neighbor and the Good Samaritan. And it's like, well, who's your neighbor? And it's like, who's your enemy? Who's your neighbor? It's like, it's just who you have compassion on. And so if you actually love, like, your enemy keeps getting closer and closer and closer. And then all of a sudden he's your brother. And so that is happening. And then there's this, as a Christian, we're called to love our enemies, and we're called to have the greatest love, which is to lay down our lives for enemies. And then there's an idea in Christianity of this eternal judgment. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with the second death? Like, am I just supposed to say, no, I did this one, but this one's like not, I wouldn't go there. And like, there's just so many things in the scripture that kind of lead to this idea of just like, I could wish myself a curse from Christ, from my brethren in the flesh. And praying that was terrifying. Because could I really wish myself eternally cursed from whatever I think heaven is for my cousin who died of an overdose? Could I do it for Hitler? Could I do it for my enemy? And then it's like, I don't think I have an option if I'm trying to follow Christ. Like I
Yeah.
really don't. He died.
Yeah.
He died for me while I was still an enemy. And so like I don't think I have an option in trying to follow him. And I don't think I have an option with the second death, because there's a way, if I have that any idea of an ideal of that perfect, it's like I have a judgment or something I can say this is right. But then if it's infinite, so is the transgression. And so that transgression just follows me all the way down, and like it just lays you naked and bare in your hypocrisy. And it's like you may not have committed the, like you may not have, like I might not have done everything Hitler did, but it's like it is still that one little thing. Just if it an infinite, if you play it out in an infinite sense, your hypocrisy, your transgression is just so, you're the chief of all sinners, and so it just
Yeah.
lays you naked and bare at the pit of hell. And then if you're asked, what about this man? What about Hitler? It's like, yeah, he did all this terrible stuff, but like I don't know. There's this you might be able to see. I think when it gets to that, you can start to see, especially playing out on that infinite scale, you can, even though we're extremely wicked sometimes, there's a way we're all still just children. And then I think there's a mercy that's still always contained in everything. And then when Christ breathes on them after his resurrection, he says, receive the Holy Spirit, whoever you forgive, I forgive. That just makes me think once forgiveness is complete, that everything will all be seeing face to face. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to see God until everybody sees, until that universalism happens, till like,
Yeah.
till Hitler turns his face to the people he harmed, they forgive him, till we're all seeing face to face. And then there's this, and then like everybody's just whole, and it's perfect. We still have this ideal that we didn't get rid of. We still have this judgment that ate us all to like send us all to the same place, to Sheol or hell or whatever. But then at the same time, it made us all whole.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I described it terribly,
It was
but
lovely.
thanks for letting me try.
I think it was beautiful. And sadly, it's the place where I have to end it because
Okay.
I have to leave to go to the gym, which is closing. But
Ooh, nice.
yeah, it'll be nice. But I feel the need to continue this conversation, uh,
I would love
Jason.
to, man. I would love to hear more of your story and hear you talk more. I talked forever.
I loved it.
Sorry.
So I'll stay in contact with you, and I'd love to continue it and
Okay.
get to some more questions because I have many more. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was really nice to get to know you a bit and your ideas. And I think you have a fascinating mind and an open one more than anything. So that's beautiful to see.
Well, thank you so much. It was great. I didn't get to know you too much, but it was great to hear a little bit about. So,
We'll get there.
thanks
We'll
for
get
letting
there.
me. Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Okay.
Have a
Well, have
good
fun
rest
at
of
the
the day.
gym, man.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
All
Have a
right.
good day.